So I think we can start. It's 2:15. Welcome everyone to the third and last session of this fantastic conference. This session is about preventive conservation and management. Hope you all enjoy. And now, please welcome Ellie and Marcel.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to moderate this wonderful session. It is truly a pleasure for me to be here today with this fantastic panel that has Jenny Williamson, Mohammed Waheed Ali, Natasha Irman, Robert Waller, and Sarah Abram. And I hope I pronounce all of your names correctly, but if I didn't, please do let me know. I don't mind being corrected at all. So one of the reasons, of course, why I am so honored to be part of this project and this session in particular is because as many young conservators that are just starting or actually are in their mid-career or just kick-starting their professional lives, many times I feel like the limit of what conservation is can be expanded or can be stretched beyond what we expect when we initially start our degree and start falling in love with this profession, right? And so this session specifically on preservation and collection management also brings up topics about who participates in the conservation process, what the conservation process can mean and for whom, and also how conservation becomes indeed less about objects and more about the people who are involved in that process. So, of course, you will see in the session description that this session will look at conservation as a form of relationship within the museum and also outside the museum. And it will probably look into the ways in which conservation implies communication skills that many times cannot be really mapped out in a curriculum or even in a skill set the conservators of what conservators must do or what they have to do. But so in summary, I'm really excited to hear about what our speakers are going to talk about that. And of course, I was asked specifically to talk about my path, which, to be honest with you, I feel slightly uncomfortable doing. So I will not do that very much. I am a conservator by training. I've done conservation throughout my training. I've looked at many different areas, and now I work in contemporary art. And I teach at UCL, and the rest you can see from my bio. I don't think I understand the point, but I decided that perhaps it would be at least more interesting for me, instead of talking about myself, to talk what I feel could be some of the themes that we'll be exploring today and how they could be important for emerging conservators, whatever that means, which is also an interesting topic to discuss. What is an emerging conservator? Is it like those little frogs in the river that are just emerging above the water? What does that mean? Is emerging a process or is emerging a status? Well, we could stay a whole 2 hours just having a conversation about that. So one of the things that I would like to discuss in this very informal presentation that I'm doing in my son's room on a Saturday afternoon is, what is the future of conservation for the conservators that are just starting, or even the conservators that have already started into this profession? So, of course, I am biased because I work in conservation of contemporary art, But one of the things that I feel it is the future of conservation for these young professionals, it's an ethical landscape that is always changing, and that it's more and more about how the conservator is positioned in the world, and less so about one specific museum or one specific institution. How are the conservators in the future that are either what is currently called the millennial generation or the Gen Z generation, how are they going to deal with the ethical issues that come at an age of global dispossession, or an age where climate change, it's not going to be a speculative future, but it's something that we are witnessing more and more every year that passes. And in a more optimistic sphere, how are these conservators going to position themselves with museums dealing with ethical issues that are part of the society that we live right now? And they were also always part of that society, but now are a bit more visible. How are we going to discuss issues of representation in collection management, injustices of misrecognition of communities and certain groups within the fabric of society in these collection management and preservation spheres? And also, when we talk about the professionalization of conservators, what will it mean to be a conservator in 5 years, in 10 years, and how can the younger generation shape that way of being in the world and that way of being in a museum or institution? So these are, in my view, very broad questions that I hope that we will approach today, because I take my moderation job very seriously, as you can imagine. I will not say what my view on this is. I'll let the speakers shine with their wonderful lights, like a prism full of colors and also full of energetic possibilities. And I will not be strict with time, because I was told specifically that I don't have to. So this is actually the best position a moderator can be at. I don't have to give my opinion, and I don't have to be strict with time. It's 10 out of 10. And I will finish my contribution right now and just introduce our wonderful first speaker, who I believe resides in the UK. So we are now part of the same home. And that is Jenny Williamson. And Jenny is a paintings conservator working at the National Library of Wales, at the Glyn Vivian Art Gallery. And she's also an independent consultant. She's interested in working with other professions to explore different aspects of conservation. And her recent projects include a collaboration with an artist to create a conservation intervention, exploring notions of subjectivity in conservation, and a collaboration with scientists, art historians, and curators to develop an exhibition on the collection, conservation, and chemistry of indigo. You can have access to her full bio in the conservation booklet that was beautifully made, by the way. I just want to also congratulate the organization on the fantastic event and the beautiful materials that we were provided with. Jenny, the floor is yours, and I look forward to hear you.
I'd like to share my screen. There we are. Is that right? Oh, wait a minute. I seem to be. There we are. Here's my first slide. Sorry for the delay. Just a bit of technical issues. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak, and thank you for that great introduction. And that was really interesting hearing Helia speak and outlining some of the issues that there are for conservation and conservators today. Yeah, it's really lovely to be here. And as earlier said, conservation is a really great profession to work in. It's really rewarding, and there's many paths and aspects to it. And I've been a practicing easel painting conservator for over 30 years now. And in that time, yeah, I really feel the ground has shifted. And now conservation, I think we really, as conservators, it's really important that we make ourselves and the conservation profession relevant to today's issues. And to do that, there's a lot of skills I feel that are necessary, which aren't always acquired in the traditional conservation training. And there's certainly a lot of skills I feel I could have benefited from earlier in my career, but there are ways to acquire these skills. So I'm going to first of all show you a short film about a project, one of my projects that I've been working on. And then I'm going to go on and describe 3 areas of non-conservation skills development, which I think are really useful areas, which as young conservators and emerging conservators, you might be doing already, but it also might be things that you could think about, which will really help with the positioning of your career and how you communicate about conservation. So I'm going to show you this film. I hope it works.
During routine conservation treatment of a portrait of a lady at the Glyn Vivian Art Gallery, the conservation team became more curious about the subject and the artist. A team of scientists from Swansea University used special analytical instruments to identify pigments used in the painting. This new valuable information and the details revealed by the restoration could enable the team to finally unlock the mystery of who the artist really is, who the painting is of, and when it was created.
So this project, which I've just shown you the sort of introductory film for, is based at the Glyn Vivian Art Gallery in Swansea, which is a publicly funded local authority gallery. And the project was particularly interesting because the scientists did not charge for their time, and the whole project was supported by funding from the scientists' own funders and the grant from the Royal Society of Chemistry. As well as doing the scientific analysis, we also included and worked with art historians. And one of the key findings of the project was that indigo was in the painting. And we also, so we've done an exhibition about this work. And one of the key things was the history of indigo and how indigo has a very sort of complex history, and the trade in indigo did, caused a lot of exploitation of humans in different parts of the world. So there's a sort of very dark history to some of the pigments in the painting, which is another area I'd like to explore. But by the work that we did, we can explore topics which are relevant today. So it's one of the key themes in the gallery at the moment. We've got a big grant for decolonializing the collection, and there will be posts there because the paintings were collected by a very rich white family who made their money in the copper works, but also did have associations with the slave trade. So there's a lot of work going on to work with the history of the collection and show other sides to it and involve different people and different voices. So conservation can also be a part of that. And I think it's quite important that we do join this debate. Anyway, but so the aim for the project was to increase interest in kind of the inner story of an object and increase interest in chemistry and conservation and how the two work together. But this is a favourite subject of mine and Cecile's, who is the lead scientist. And I believe our enthusiasm for this helps secure interest and support and the funding. So the key points that I really like to make is that to really be successful, it's important to start with core values and things that you're passionate about in conservation. So this slide, I think shows, I was thinking about what sort of skills are useful in a conservation career, and particularly at the moment, and there's a huge number of skills. So, you know, there was obviously conservation skills, and that's part of it. And you've acquired those in your training, you'll continue to acquire those through your career. There's sustainability, which is a big issue now, and there's groups that'll help you become more sustainable in your own practice and help influence how your institution is sustainable. Equality and diversity are big issues, but then there's these other core skills, which I'm going to talk a little bit about now, because there are ways to acquire these sorts of skills which will help with communication and collaboration. So yeah, these 3 areas of development I'm going to talk about, which I found really useful in my work. There's leadership training, which I believe can give you a framework for self-development. There's continual professional development, which can give you a framework. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read my slides and actually everything's in front of it. So it's just a framework for skills development. And there's business skills, which is a framework for developing a business model, which can be applicable for setting up your own business if you want to go into private practice, or with project working. So with leadership skills, I'm doing a leadership course at the moment. I'm doing one that's been that's run through ICON, the Institute of Conservation in the UK. It's a 12-month course, and we explore different areas of being a leader. I mean, leadership and leader sounds like, okay, you're the head of the team and you're always at the front, but it's actually, I think it's bigger than that. And more subtle as well. So wherever you are in your profession, or wherever you are within the institution, you can still be a leader in conservation. You can still be leading with your core values, and you can be influencing the people around you with those things. So part of the course was we spent some time identifying and thinking a lot about our own vision and values for where we are and what we want to be doing with our careers and within our own spheres of work. We've looked at communication, which is a really key skill, and looking at your own styles of communication and thinking about how other people communicate, and sort of delving deeper into those areas can really help with project working and working in your institution. Again, interpersonal styles is key to it all. People like working different ways, and looking at those generic types of different styles can really help, and can help you. Like if you feel, I mean, I think I'm quite, and maybe other conservators are, we're quite often quite task focused and kind of have quite a lot of attention to detail, but sometimes it's important to be able to talk about the bigger picture and communicate that bigger picture. So by really doing a bit of self-analysis, it can help you, and definitely has helped me. And then another part of leadership, or this sort of training, is looking at problem solving and decision making. So yeah, what makes a great leader? I put up a few images of people who I think are great leaders, and it's the key to it, I think, is that they're very clear about their core values and they stick to their core values, and they're truly authentic, and you believe that they believe, and therefore they're very good with where they're going and taking people with them. So I think that's a message to all of us, that if we want conservation to be valued, and if we want to be part of the conversation in certain ways, we need to be clear about our own values and be good at communicating those. Okay, continuing professional development is a really useful tool. I do CPD with ICON as part of the accreditation process. So I'm an accredited conservator. So the Institute of Conservation runs an accreditation scheme. Once you're part of that, your continual professional development is part of that. And that's very useful. Looking at the areas in your career and in your work and in your professional work. So it's quite a lot of it's about reflection, looking at yourself and your work patterns, and where you can identify maybe gaps or skills gaps to help you move forward in the direction you want to go. So there's this kind of very well recognized CPD cycle, and it's not just conservation. You can find CPD in all professions, and you can do CPD external to a conservation body. There's a lot of models out there, there's online help, and I found that really useful to really reflect on my practice at any one time, and then keep finding areas that I'd like to develop and grow into. So yeah, the key features are very much self-appraisal, planning, acting, and then reflecting on how that's gone. So yeah, very much self-directed and driven by you. Again, the other area is business skills. I hadn't thought business skills would be something that I would need to know about, but I did set up my own practice about 20 years ago. I became fully self-employed for a while, and to do that I approached a local business centre, and I had some training in business skills. I had some one-to-one sessions with a business trainer, and it was really useful. I wrote a business plan. It was part of the setting up the studio. I actually developed a partnership with the National Library of Wales and with Aberystwyth University, and by working in partnership with these two institutions, we managed to secure a big grant from the Museums and Galleries Commission, which doesn't exist anymore. It's a UK body, and so we secured £12,000, which paid for a microscope for the studio, which was really useful. So I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't done the business skills course and the business planning. So these areas, but business skills and business planning can also particularly help with project work. So if you're doing a project, it's very often useful to write a business plan, and it can be very useful for securing funding for one-off projects. So there we are. There's the various templates available, and I think now with everything, so much is online, it's very easy to access these sorts of training and these things. So I don't know whether I'm on time or not. I think that might be around 10 minutes. I didn't know. I could have.
Yes, you're fine.
Okay. I would have talked a bit more perhaps about my other project where we were exploring some of the ethics in conservation, but I haven't got any good slides of those. But really, yeah, I just think it's important to develop other skills apart from conservation skills, and then it enables you to do, and it certainly enabled me to develop my career in different ways. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Jenny. That was very enlightening, also because you are part of the UK system. And one of the things that it's really interesting in conservation is that the systems vary massively depending on where you're based. So it's great to hear more about that. So the next speaker is Mohammed Waheed. And Mohammed is the executive manager of the Conservation Center at the National Museum of the Egyptian Civilization. He is the head of the Receiving Artifacts Unit and manager of Silicate Objects Lab at the Conservation Center, and he takes part as a conservator and member of the excavation team in many archaeological missions in Egypt. He graduated from the Faculty of Archaeology's Conservation Department at Cairo University in 2009. And in 2021, his master's double degree in museology at the University of Würzburg, Germany, and L1 University, Cairo. As with Jenny, you can find his full bio in the booklet. Mohammed, before I give you the floor, let me just tell everyone that you can use the reacting buttons in Zoom. It should be very intuitive after 18 months in a pandemic. And you can also put your comments and questions to our speakers in the chat. And if you do not feel comfortable posting them publicly, just send them directly to me, and I will post them as an anonymous question. So you have many possibilities here. All right, Mohammed, thank you so much for waiting while I did this small announcement. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Here you see my screen. Yes, yes, perfect.
Okay now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Bismillah. Firstly, I would like to thank all of you, thank Mrs. Delia for introduce me for this wonderful conference. You are welcome in the last session of this conference, thesis of consultation. Also, I would like to thank all of you, thanks also the organization team, Anna and Katrina, you are doing a great job. Me, I am Mohammed Waheed Ali. I'm a conservator and the executive manager of the Conservation Center at the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. From my graduation and from my university study and after my graduation from the Faculty of Archaeology Conservation Department at Cairo University at 2009, I always interested in build my international professional career in the field of archaeology. So I thinking more, how can I do it? Please give me attention. I will let you know from spotlight of my career and my work in the previous years. Firstly, I decided to learn more according to my colleagues, speakers in the days after and also today. They told that you must learn more, share your experience, attend more events, workshops in your country, search about it. My first job or my first interact with antiquities was inside this museum. I think you must know the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, but my work was not inside the museum. It was in the door of this building. You must know also this building is an archaeological building related to Islamic one from the Osmani one, and now it is the museum, the biggest Egyptian museum, contain a lot of artifacts from the pharaonic era. I start my work in this wooden door, wonderful one, for free. And why for free? Because I am in the level of how can I build myself. After that, I going to be a conservator at excavation mission or excavation sites mission in Egypt started from 2011. And my first question for you, if you are a conservator and if you are a decision maker in excavation site and found like this coffin from pottery, what is your decision to extract it? Please thinking and told me in the discussion. After that, I applied when I every day build myself and extract and gain a lot of information, build my knowledge in this field. I decided to when I going to apply for the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. I become a consultant in this a huge institution, a huge museum in Egypt and in the Middle East. I become a conservator. Firstly, in wood, stone, pottery from 2030 until 2040. And then I become a manager of the receiving artifacts unit, who is responsible for backing and unbacking of all the kind of the objects. Here, after that, I become a manager of the conservation lab, who is responsible for conservation of kind of synthetic materials, clay, glass, ceramic, faience, and plaster. And in 2021, I become promoted to be the executive manager of the conservation center here in the Nemec. All of these days, I build my skills, I develop myself, and also my advice to you to build your skills every day, gain more and more information, build yourself, trust yourself. You are conservator among this. While I work in the museum, I choosing to be a director of a restoration architecture museum site in Cairo in 2016. You'll find this is a founding from the Islamic era, and this is building also from this site. I invited to give a lot of literature and a lot of events and workshops in Egypt and outside of Egypt, like the Accreditation Studies, which organized by FAO organization in Cairo. And here I invited also to attend the meeting for cooperation between Italian and Egyptian for archaeology and cultural heritage, discuss and share the knowledge. My advice to you, according to Thomas Henry, you must know everything about one thing and one thing about everything. Why? Because if you are sit and you talk with the media, you must, after building your knowledge and building yourself, you must trust your information, which you are building it day after day and confirming it by research, by search, by touching, by also increase your network, increase your relationship in this field. You also must trust yourself when you are receive your visitor to your lab and talking about your work to everyone by trusting it. When we are in the time of Corona pandemic, also you must don't give up. While all the world, but the mask on the faces, the world open a new way in your hands, in your mobile. You can travel to all the world from your home. So you can attend a lot of workshops, a lot of events online, like we are today together. And also you can invite to give a lecture or share information in a lot of events also or workshop. For me, I also finished my master's degree in physiology from the University of Pittsburgh and University. Out of Egypt, I invited with my colleagues here to the National Museum in PPC to organize about the latest things or newest methods for conservation and restoration. And also invited here to the Cyprus Institute for the Ancient Materials Training School, organized by Sesame. And the last one, I invited to attend the Ancient Landscape Materials and Natural Resource Summer School, focused on atomic photography in Cyprus in the town called Bidulus over the mountain. My advice, and to complete the advices for all of you, you must increase your relationship, increase your network. There is a lot of institutes, museums in your country and out of your country. You can be member with it. You can communicate with it. Let your work talking about you. Increase your knowledge, increase your information day after day, that you are a conservator. A conservator, this is a lot of responsibility is over you. But the conservator is the first member of the antiquities preservation system, and without him, we cannot preserve heritage and antiquities. And without any effective and administrative system, there can be no chance to preserving antiquities. You must put in your mean or your mind the main base for conservation. Less interference is the better interference. I will do quickly to know a lot about preventive conservation. The concept of it is to extend the life of the equity by reducing future risks and reducing the interference with treatment in the future. This is a lot of measures and activities aimed to monitor and control the environmental system by using devices with modern technology that we can avoid deterioration or losses in the future and reduce it as much as possible. A lot of works we can do to achieve it, like periodic conservation of activities, inspection and control, and periodic cleaning, handling and backing of activities, control the surrounding environmental condition and storage methods. We can use a material, suitable one, application of topical mechanical devices, and also the central air condition for all the museum. No. We have a lot of goals that we can give it to the object by applying the preventive conservation and management for it, that we can deal with the object by extend the life of it. We can deal with it as a human. We need to save it as long as possible, protecting ecological objects from damage and saving it of dangers in the place of storage and also in the conservation centers, applying the correct message of storage, transporting, backing, and defining the conservation programs, schooling or implementing treatments intervention completely. As I said, the least intervention is the best one. We can identify the current condition of the artifact, and also we can do a lot of examination to determine the period of restoration and to protect it from biological agents and sterilization it and the regular conservation. So, the monitoring, production, and periodic measurement of environmental and climate factors, it means that protective conservation measures in the installation of internal climate control devices since prevention is the previous of a suitable climate. You must have a condition report and responding everything for the object temperature, relative humidity, intensity of light and pollution, daily or monthly or seasonally. As you know, we have a 3 level of sensitive material. The percentage of achievement of the target to reach a certain level of preventive conservation standard, we can organize it in a 3 level: negative climate sensitive material and climate sensitive material, and third one, hello, are you with me?
Yes, definitely.
The third one, significantly climate sensitive material. All of this level, we must put in our mind how we can deal with it, with the air condition, temperature, and humidity, air pollution, and everything. So I will take you quickly to our museum, the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. This is located in the city of Infostat. The Infostat is the first city, Islamic one in Africa and in Egypt. And this project we are here is the largest cultural and civilization project, which that the Ministry of Antiquities in Egypt was deal with the technical participation with UNESCO to establish it. It is a general view of my museum. You have, this is the main entrance and 2 buildings. The first one you have here. You have here theater. It's like a cultural project, and the second one contains exhibition halls and the conservation labs and the administrative. Here in the right, we would find a natural lake inside the museum, and here we can find archaeological site called the dying house from the Islamic era. We have a lot of challenges to open the museum. Year after year after year, this photo was taken at the midnight before the opening of the museum. And in the middle here, you will find our Ministry of Antiquities, Dr. Khalid Al-Alani, and all of my colleagues from the curator and the conservator who worked day after day to let the dream become a reality. And yes, we can do it. In the time of Corona and all the world was closed, our President Abdul Fattah al-Sisi and with our Ministry of Antiquities, Dr. Khalid Al-Alani, opened the central gallery of the museum.
It is our civilizations and sites, our bridges that connect us with our common past.
هذا المتحف
Here is,
بتكمن
sorry, I extend the time, sorry. Here is our exhibition here. I take a lot of time. I'm so sorry.
You've passed the time. I wonder if
Pass the
it would be
time. Oh,
possible.
okay.
Yes, I mean, it is fine. There's no big deal. But I wonder if you could summarize your main conclusion
Yes,
shortly.
yes. I will
Thank
do
you.
it. I will do it. Thank you. I will go directly to our conservation center here, and we how we can do some preventive conservation. Right? We have a lot of elements that we can do it. We start with the receiving artifacts unit, and we can deal with the objects with a safe and safe materials and receive it in the museum using hand palette and using some stacker to let it go to the museum using some wire tabs. As you see here, unpacking the area, we have first aid labs, anoxia to sterilizing the insects, and this is served in the wall. As you see here, we have mummies study and restoration unit, iconic and the old oil painting one, heavy antiquities lab, food conservation lab, manuscripts, textile, a lot of detail one pottery. Why all of this? Because we have determined and we are dealing with the objects inside the museum according to the material. We have a lot of scientific labs in my museum. The storage area in the museum was different according to the type of the material. As you see, a lot of elements that we can save the antiquities inside the museum, a lot of shelves inside the storage room. Here is how we can deal with the fire extinction system in the museum, also according to the type of the material, and how we can deliver the objects from the conservation center to the storage area and handling it is very specialized one. And day after day, how we can inspection and control with the objects in the museum, how we can deal with it in our exhibition galleries using the different type of showcases and different type of light. The role also you must know your role in the exhibition area and make the objects come more stable in the exhibition, monitoring and placing the logger inside the exhibition showcases. Outside the museum, we achieve our IBM integrate this management to be 5 insects out of the museum, and also the migration system don't let the monitor going to the museum. Cultivate cultivation of a palm trees through the museum in order to prevent the dust and sand outside the museum. In the end, I'm sorry for the 16th time, the preventive conservation techniques must be applied because they are responsible for delivering the archaeological and heritage artifact to the future generations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for such a generous presentation. And sorry about the nudge about the time. I just want to make sure that we have time to hear your fantastic thoughts after everyone presents. So the next speaker is Natasha Irman, and Natasha is a co-founder and sole owner of Stilt, where she brings her knowledge of the preservation of antiquarian books, as well as her craft and engineering skills to the design, development, and production of book support products. And she has been conserving and restoring antiquarian books since 1996. Again, look at her bio, full bio in the booklet. Natasha, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So thanks, Celia, for the introduction. I also want to thank the organizers of the conference for inviting me to speak. It's an honor for me to be able to connect with a whole new generation of colleagues, and I'm curious to hear shortly about your hopes and struggles as you start out in your careers. So I'm Natasha Irman. I own Redbone Bindery Conservation Atelier here in the Netherlands, and I'm also the owner of Stilt Book Cradles. I've been restoring and conserving antiquarian books for about 25 years. Clients are institutions such as libraries and museums, private collectors, and the book trade. So on this panel today, I'm a bit of the which one of these is not like the others speaker. I got into the field of conservation because of my love for craft and embodied knowledge, and also my interest in the philosophy of material heritage. And back when I started out, I knew I wanted to find a daily practice that would enable me to get my hands dirty, and also that would give me a quiet space to be able to think about the philosophical ideas behind the work that I was doing. So frankly, preventive conservation and management was not on the top of my passion list. I kind of assumed that preventive conservation involved a sort of an arm's length care and management of large collections in public institutions, surrounded by a constant barrage of people. And I assume that my colleagues who chose this field spent most of the time crunching numbers, spreadsheets, kind of struggling to communicate with sometimes oblivious institutional employees. And that was not something that I was interested in, at least not early on in my career. So a little bit of a history of the trajectory of my career. I started off doing old school book restoration, which was an offshoot of the field of hand bookbinding at the time. I eventually joined a few conservation associations. I met some colleagues in my field, and I became aware of the Conservation Code of Ethics, and also the not so respectful way in which craft restoration was judged by my more formally trained colleagues. So I began to incorporate the principles of things like minimal intervention, removability in the treatments that I was doing. And interestingly, in the antiquarian book world, this coincided nicely with the dawn of the internet. So there was a time pre-internet, if you can imagine it. And back then people actually read and consulted paper books. They often even read used books, and yes, even antiquarian books. So when those books broke, they brought them to restorers like the old guy that I learned my skills from when I first started out. And those books would come to us to be fixed, basically so that they could be safely read and consulted again. Along comes the dawn of the internet, which suddenly offers readers this easy access to information, which as a result rendered many paper books obsolete. The other thing that the internet did was to severely disturb what was previously an opaque market, buying and selling market of rare and used books, which for economic reasons led to the demise of what I call the middle class of the book trade. So these two effects of the birth of the internet had a huge effect on how I worked as a book conservator. Because people weren't reading their books anymore, book collections were being thrown into the dumpster. When things get thrown away or de-accessioned, as they say in the institutional world, there's always a triage involved. So you have to make a choice about what gets kept and what gets tossed. In the case of large book collections, often only the truly valuable or rare books were kept. In other words, I call this the elite class of books. And these books were kept not for their information content anymore, but now they were being kept for their iconic value. You can download and read Darwin's Origin of Species on your iPhone. It's going to give you the information you're looking for, but it's a whole other kettle of fish to have in your hands the first edition of this historically important title in its original cloth binding with few, if any, alterations to its original material state. So in my work, it became all about minimal intervention. And if not for the ethics, then at least for that kind of iconic adrenaline hit that you get when you hold in your hands the material birthplace of a new idea. So as I mentioned, this internet disturbance coincided coincidentally with my growing awareness of the principles of conservation. So how did this affect my daily practice? Well, concretely, it meant that rather than lifting material around a broken spine in order to introduce structural and material strength underneath to the joints, and in my discipline, that would be considered a relatively invasive treatment, though it is also often the treatment necessary in order to be able to really read this book again. I began to do more surface and external repairs. External treatments are always going to be less robust, but of course, they're also going to be more easily removable without causing too much damage to original materials. And that, of course, conforms to the direction towards minimal intervention, which is demanded by the ethics. All changes come at a cost. So these new and less robust techniques that I was developing, they required a kind of a long disclaimer or like the list of side effects that I had to continue to convey to my clients. So after the treatment, my client could no longer, expect to be able to flex open their book the way you do when you hold a book in your hands or put it down on the table and flex it open and expect that my repairs were going to hold true. So I found myself nagging my clients, buy a book cushion, prop your book up against something at a particular angle so that it doesn't flex open too widely. And they'd look at me and they'd nod. And of course, they wouldn't listen. Often the books that I had repaired came back to me to be re-repaired just because they were not heeding my advice. It wasn't sinking in. It's a little bit like, you go to the doctor and they tell you, eat your vegetables, you'll feel so much better, but somehow the vegetables don't get eaten, the symptoms remain. So at a certain point, it's like the doctor's words are empty unless they can suggest a practical and easily achievable and also a pleasurable way to get your vegetables eaten. So a good example of this, my family recently started to order HelloFresh. I don't know if you guys know this. It's like one of those put it together box meals, and it comes with like an easy to follow recipe. It's delivered to your door on a Monday morning. Suddenly, guess who's cooking and eating her vegetables? It's sort of, I looked at that model and I thought, you know what, maybe the onus is a little bit on me to help my clients more than just with empty words. So together with a colleague of mine who studied museum curation, I developed a system of book display solutions, and they can precisely control the opening angle of any book. So the cradles they help to prolong the integrity of not only my own repairs, but also the original materials and structures of book bindings. And that fulfills that practical bit that I was telling you about, with my little vegetable analogy. So here's an example of a cradle. They come in different angles. The other thing about them is that they fold flat when you're not using them. So they can be stored beside your book on the bookshelf. They all have acid-free buffered, it's made of acid-free buffered material, so you can safely put them on the shelf with your book. And this fulfills the easily achievable part of the analogy. My clients can no longer kind of give me the excuse that they can't find their book cushions or that these book cushions take up too much space on their desks, and so they have to put them somewhere else. And then finally, at least I like to think they have a really elegant design. So a bit like the tastiness of my HelloFresh dinners, they make the supporting and displaying of antiquarian books pleasurable. I like to call it bibliophilic eye candy. These products are now being used in museums, libraries, public and private, antiquarian book fairs, traveling exhibitions all over Europe and North America. And they're also, interestingly, sometimes you're surprised with how people end up using these things. They're often used to safely photograph books for virtual exhibitions and the like. So back to me being the one person on today's panel who doesn't really belong with the rest of you. The irony here is that, me, this craft trained sort of single object, sensory oriented, a little old school book restorer, is suddenly the owner of a preventive book conservation business. So for you emerging conservators out there, I think the take-home message is always question your assumptions. Like, you don't have to necessarily choose between the three categories on offer at the symposium, and take seriously your creative impulses, your innate sort of needs and desires for your career, and your frustrations. And most importantly, just keep an open mind. You never know what's going to happen in your hopefully long and pleasurable careers that you have ahead of you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Oh, I agree. It's bibliographic eye candy. It's really nice. And about not belonging, perhaps we can all belong in our distinctiveness, in our differences, because we are all different. So we kind of belong in the margins in a way. So thank you so much, Natasha. I look forward to receiving questions for Natasha and all the other speakers. And without any further ado, we'll move on to Robert Waller, which I find very interesting that I'm introducing someone that clearly, as much as all the other speakers, needs no introductions, but well, I need to do some part of my moderation job. So Robert Waller is now the president and senior risk analyst with Protect Heritage Corporation, I believe, a firm dedicated to helping institutions and organizations improve heritage management. His career included 33 years with the Canadian Museum of Nature, serving periods as Chief of Conservation and as Managing Director of Collection Services Division. You can see his biography in the booklet. Before I pass to Robert Waller, I would just like to say that his work is so pioneering that even a contemporary art conservator like myself spent yesterday at least 2 hours looking at risk assessment through the Waller method. So I mean, it tells you enough. Even contemporary art conservators could imagine. All right, so Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Helia. You're too kind. Actually, I'd be happy to listen to Natasha for another 10 minutes. I thought that was a terrific presentation. So anyway, but I'll do my little bit here. And let's see, move this bar out of the way. Somebody yell if something's going wrong. But I wanted to call this Into the Future. Whoop. Oh. Am I still being seen and heard?
You are being heard, not seen, and
No.
your screen sharing has started, but I think you have to double click to enter full screen mode. Would you like to try that out?
Yeah, no, that's, I actually did get a message from Zoom saying that it stopped. So I'll just try again.
Yes, please.
Do we get it now?
Not yet.
Oh, bother.
Yes, even when we try these things out, computers sometimes have their own will, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a little bit discouraging, but because the sound's there, oh my goodness, I really don't quite understand. Sorry about this, folks.
That's fine. Robert, did you send your presentation to any of the people of the local organizing committee?
No, I was bad. Now, okay. Do you see my screen now?
No.
We cannot see your screen.
let me just try stopping my screen share for a bit, if I can.
Yes.
Oh.
Can you?
Is
Oh,
that
fantastic. It's
okay,
in. It's in. It's just a matter of perseverance.
Okay.
All right.
Are we getting it?
Super.
Okay, good. Okay, let's go. And I'm going to talk about into the future, managing preventive conservation, because preventive conservation is very much about the future, which is one of the real challenges with it. We don't get a lot of feedback in real time that can change what we're deciding to do. For preventive conservation as an aspirational goal, as much as possible, we want to preserve indefinitely. Of course, I think we'd all agree with that, but we also all know this is not going to happen because stuff happens, right? For all of us as people, we tend to want to control things, especially when we feel professionally responsible. To discharge that responsibility, we naturally feel that we need to control things. However, there can be many more things that we're capable of influencing, but not controlling. And then beyond that, there will be other things that we simply have to accept. So in terms of preventive conservation, we might be able to influence the repair schedule for a roof, the rekeying of locks, things like that, but it's not really under our control. And we might have to accept some political decisions, some world economic factors, pandemics, some things like that. Now, we have a natural tendency to want to extend our ability to control so that we're certain that we're discharging our responsibilities. But that really comes at a cost. We lose a lot of our ability to influence if we're striving to control things all the time. And we're not really able to accept either, because we're just tied up in wanting to control. Now, if on the other hand, we reduce how much we want to control, then that actually frees up some ability to influence more. And that increased influence can make us much more effective at achieving preservation. And we'll explore this a little bit in the time that I have. In doing that, we can let go of some of our feeling of a need to control, and we can reduce what we simply have to accept, because our influence can extend further than it could have if we were striving to control too much. So how do we increase influence, reduce our need to control? Well, okay, we do that by reducing a need to control and fostering a clear common goal. I don't know if you're all familiar with the parable of the blind men meeting an elephant for the first time, who had never witnessed an elephant before, but it's quite a powerful little parable where one of the group of them want to figure out, well, what is this elephant thing? You know, we've got a great sense of touch. Let's go figure it out. So one of them goes and holds on to the trunk and says, oh, it's like a really large snake. And another one goes and feels the ear and says, oh, no, this is like a large fan. The one feeling the leg says, no, I think you've got it wrong. This is a tree trunk. And the one holding the tail says, no, guys, you're all wrong. This is really a rope. So we all have kind of limited experience, limited perspectives, and preservation relies on so many skill sets, ranging from security to facilities to classical preventive conservation to registration and so on, that we really need to share some common understandings and a common purpose. To do that, it's really important to separate an operational goal for preservation from our aspirational goal. So we aspire to preserve as much as possible for as long as possible. But we set up an operational goal, and that is to imagine our collection, not right today, because we're all busy. Heck, we're even at a conference on Saturday. So preservation is too important an issue to simply jump into and say, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. So let's look at, say, 2 years from now, when we can really have some time to plan out an effective preservation strategy. Then we set up our goal to carry the collection forward in time by 100 years with no damage or loss. Now that becomes our well-defined operational goal. Of course, reality is going to laugh at us and say, well, that's not going to happen, guy, because stuff happens. Here we see that 2 items have gone missing out of the collection after 100 years. We don't know, maybe they were stolen, maybe they're just misplaced, or maybe they're in the director's home or office, who knows. But clearly that is a departure from our goal, and that is how we define a risk. A risk is a departure from our operational goal. Another something that might happen is maybe 1/3 of the collection goes on permanent exhibit under bright lights and fades over time. Again, another departure from the goal, so it will become another defined risk. And finally, there might be just a chance of a catastrophic event that could destroy the whole collection. But over the 100 years, we consider that statistical chance to be another departure from our goal, so it becomes another defined risk. Now, I talk about defined risks because defining it clearly is critically important. We cannot attach any sense of the size or magnitude of the risk if we've not nailed down our definition and our idea of what we're talking about. So we strive to define clearly, referencing the source, the hazard source of the risk, whether it's seismic or water or whatever, the path. How does the risk get from the hazard source to the collection? That can be critically important, especially for things like water leaks, criminals, and that sort of thing. And finally, the effect. What effect do we expect this to have? Is it going to be complete loss of items or just loss of some of the values? Typically, items have many values. Maybe just some of the values are affected. And we recognize that a magnitude of risk is really just a simple thing. It's just the part of the collection value we expect to be lost over 100 years. So it might be a number like 10% or 1% or 20%. Those are often the numbers that we're dealing with. Now, in a risk, this is just kind of my summary slide. A risk-based approach does have some disadvantages. Our technical goal orientation applied in a humanistic field can be really challenging. A lot of the people in power, senior curators, are not so interested in considering this very technical perspective. They prefer to rely on their connoisseurship and judgment. But we can actually work through that. Another potential disadvantage is a constrained perspective that we're, again, this comes out of our technical orientation. We're really just thinking about material change in state to items, interpreting those as of value lost given the mission of the institution and the purpose of the collection. So this can be a problem, but there are ways to deal with that through what we call system of systems, that it's not just a single system that we're dealing with, but like our bodies have skeletons, nerves, circulatory, and other systems. In collection management, we not only preserve, but we use the collections, we develop them, and all of collection management sits alongside of education and research and those things. So we understand that, we recognize that and deal with it. But there are many advantages to a risk assessment approach. It facilitates systematic learning. So it really helps us build on our experience into a comprehensive understanding. It makes the best use of available evidence and makes us search out evidence. It makes accountability demonstrable. So we're not just blaming each other and saying, oh, it's his fault, it's his fault. It becomes truly a shared responsibility with some common understanding of who does what. So facilitates communication and team effort and can be really comprehensive and eliminate blind spots. So thank you for your attention, and I'll pass back to Helia.
Thank you so much, Robert. And thank you for such a clear and inspiring presentation on a topic that sometimes can get quite muddy, at least speaking as a former student. Sometimes it was a bit complicated to understand some of the concepts, but it was super clear. Thank you so much. And our last speaker for today's session and the final session of this conference is Sarah Abram. Is it Abram or Abram, Sarah?
It is Abram.
Abram. Sorry, I'm happy
Abram.
that Sarah Abram. So Sarah is an art historian, graduated from the University of Turin, and she later earned her PhD at the Scuola Normale Superiore of Pisa. And I'm sorry for my Italian accent, not very good.
It's perfect.
Oh, too kind. You're too kind. We are already with the pleasantries. It's almost like we could have been having dinner this evening if this wasn't an online meeting. And where she carried a research project focused on the relationship between cultural heritage and urban societies. She is now, if I'm not mistaken, project development and fundraising department manager at CCR, and she had responsibility of building national international partnerships for the definition of interdisciplinary research, and including the launch of the Young Professionals Forum. And since the 2020, she holds the position of Secretary General of the CCR. Sarah, the floor is yours. And as I said, the full biography is in the booklet.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you. I'm very glad to meet all of you and to have this opportunity to participate in the 6th Student and Emerging Conservator Conference about the phases of conservation. And I'm also so honored to speak together with such qualified and above all very, very interesting colleagues. And thank you to all of them for their intervention, very inspiring also for me. Now I try to share my presentation. Okay. Okay, and so, okay, can you see the presentation well, quite well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. As you have just heard, I studied history of art and museology, and I carried out a lot of researches about 20th century museum and archives and about history of conservation. But I belong to a generation of art historians who have had few tools and above all, few training opportunities on management issues in a cultural field. For this reason, my skills have been formed mainly through work experiences. In particular, I have always tried to build projects and work programs by questioning their sustainability and how they could be implemented. Since our foundation, which is called Centro Conservazione Restauro La Venaria Reale, but I will call it Center. Since the center was founded, I have been part of the staff. I started as an art historian, but through the years, I had the responsibility of building national and international partnership for the definition of interdisciplinary research and training programs. And thanks to a gradual growth that has been granted to me so far, today I'm speaking as the Secretary General. The center has been founded by public and private institutions, following the example of the organizations and functions of the main public conservation institutes in Italy and abroad, but above all with Italian examples. Today, our foundation covers the whole cycle of preservation that goes from training to monitoring, prevention, maintenance, conservation, management, sharing, and dissemination of related themes. This means that within the center, there are many different professional figures, such as art historians, conservators, scientists, managers, employees, chief managers that cooperate together. Thanks to the presence of such different skills, we have been able to build our strength, which consists in a scientific and holistic approach to artworks, able to detect all the elements that represent the artistic and cultural value of an artifact. The multidisciplinarity to always keep the conservator's perspective in relation to scientists and art historians. A knowledge-based intervention for constant monitoring over all the activities performed on the artwork. A cutting-edge innovation and technologies, also useful for documenting the works and promoting their dissemination and enhancement. An higher standard of intervention connected to ethic and scientific control parameters, which are continuously checked with museums and cultural heritage authorities. A complexity management, not to neglect any of the aspects that allow the works to survive. Then a cultural mediation to ensure the transfer of our knowledge to large and multiple target groups. Inclusiveness and shared knowledge and procedures, because we believe that the growth of our work depends on the dialogue with the outside world. And then quality and responsiveness, fundamental for any intervention or action. So it's not always so easy to keep together such important paradigms, but all in our case as a private foundation. The center is the only Italian example of a private institute which is involved with the University of Torino in the management of a master's degree course in cultural heritage conservation. As you probably know, in Italy, you need to follow a 5-year university course to become a cultural heritage conservator. Then we have our internal higher educational school, which offers educational courses and lifelong training. Our school adopts a methodological approach aimed to share the growth of skills throughout the discussion and the active participation of all those involved in the training processes. We refer to a circular model that concerns the complete cycle of the profession: training, continuous updating on innovative methodologies, networking, co-design, experimentation, and access to work. The center offers growth opportunities to graduates who have the chance to enter the world of real work, thanks to the experience gained within the internship courses. Every year we offer about 12 internships for as many former students. Thanks to this experience, young conservators are supported and assisted in the delicate transition from study to practice. A very important role in our center is dedicated to the decision-making process, which is divided in many phases, beginning from the study and research on the project until the last step, which is the acknowledgement of the objectives. The definition of the critical and methodological approach is the result of a continuous dialogue, not only between our internal competencies, but above all with our stakeholders. The success of a conservation project also depends on an understanding of the cultural context in which it is carried out, as well as on a scientific evaluation of the data at our disposal. This is the reason why our multi-steps shared process involves museums and cultural institutions, but also the different communities involved in the use of the cultural heritage: museum staff, museum visitors, local communities, schools, professionals, and researchers. So we try to collect as much data and information about the context in which we operate that helps us to define the priorities, the critical issues, and the assessment of the conservative interventions. Then we study the artwork values and we focus on the evaluation of the intervention sustainability. The topic of sustainability is one of the priorities of our time, and we reflect on the concept on sustainable management every day. At this point of the decision-making process, it begins the phase of the diagnosis, when we discuss with the multidisciplinary team about the result arising from the historical, technical, and scientific research. On the basis of the discussed results, we finally share the methodologies for the intervention. At the end, we carry out a critical evaluation of the expected goals from the conservation treatment by identifying the desired outcomes from the dissemination activities, but also an evaluation of values, of contents, and results. In order to grow within a career in conservation field, a fundamental role is played by competence you have, which is an absolute prerogative. So you always have to update yourself. As you discuss in this very interesting conference, you need to deeply touch the context of your future work. And at the same time, you need to develop hard and soft skills. The preservation, the conservation, and the transmission of cultural heritage need a lot of preparation today in technical abilities, in scientific disciplines, and humanities. But above all, we need, I think that we need to be connected, to know our different contexts and cultures. We need to contaminate our different perspectives and to share our research and our discoveries. These are the reasons for our Young Professionals Forum. Last year, we launched a community linked to the forum, and I would be very happy if you would like to join it in the future. The participation in the forum also gives the opportunity to follow a program of activities at our center or an online program as well. I really hope you are going to apply too in our next edition, which is going to be presented on the 17th of December in an online meeting. My presentation now is finished. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm available for any questions or consideration that you would like to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So before we go to the questions, I would like to invite everyone to take a break. I would say that everyone needs to stretch their legs, get a bit of coffee, tea, water, juice, well, to each its own. And we'll be meeting back here in our virtual room at 3:48 to give some leeway for people to arrive. And so we will be back live at 3:50. Is that all right? Okay. I assume the silence as a sign of consent in this case specifically. All right, and thank you so much. And for those of you who are back to the screen earlier, just don't forget to pop in your questions in the chat so that we can all have a discussion about the cultures of conservation, the issues affecting young professionals, and how we can also generate new and interesting synergies for all of us that are present here in this Saturday afternoon together. All right, so see you back here in 10 minutes. So welcome back. We will kickstart the Q&A in 1 minute. And don't forget, if you want to ask something to a specific speaker, do mention that. But also you are free to just bring your questions to the panel, like Ilaria Alessi did. And thank you for that, Ilaria. And also, I would like to thank everyone who already put their questions in the chat. I would say it's always hard to be the first one, but let's hope this is just the first of many, many questions that we can raise today. So we will start again at 3:50 local time. Can I ask the organizing committee to perhaps change the layout of the Zoom so that we look a bit more like a panel? Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, much better. So, again, welcome back. I'm here to moderate the Q&A. If you feel comfortable and you don't want to put the question in the chat, just raise your hand, your virtual hand, because I cannot probably see your actual hand. I'll be here to moderate all your questions. We have a couple, but I will do a very undemocratic thing, and I will actually start with one of my questions, if that's all right, and then we'll proceed to the questions that we have in the chat. So thank you again, all of you, for all your contributions for this last session of the conference. One of the aspects that was really interesting that I've seen across all presentations, and I would like to hear more what you think about, that when we look at conservation as a future-facing profession, is when we talk about sustainability versus resources, not in terms just of human resources, but all types of resources. How can we foster a more ethical and social and environmental conscious practice within the framework of preventive conservation? And in your opinion, what are the skills and also the possibilities that this young generation of conservators brings to the table in that regard? I know this is a big question, but I wonder if we could hear a bit more about your thoughts about this, your opinions. It doesn't have to be a big inspirational proposition, only aspirational, as Robert so well said. Yes, Robert, please.
Sure, I could jump in a little bit. I'm sure all of us have been thinking about this so much in the last few years. It's such an important current topic. For me, and based on my experience from doing the kind of things that I do, our best hope is to let go of little concerns that don't really matter. We expend a lot of resources ranging from emotional energy to political capital to just dollars and cents on things that have entered our field as ideals of what should be done, but really don't have that much impact on the ultimate preservation.
Thank you so much, Robert. That's a very interesting topic, also when we talk about environmental standards, for example. I wonder if anyone else would like to jump in. Jenny, yes. But you don't have to raise your hand, just jump in, literally.
Okay, well, I'd just like to say it's a difficult topic. It's quite hard to really improve our behavior so that we can be more sustainable, but it's possible, and it's really good to work together with it. So there are quite a number of environmental groups and conservation out there. So I know that with the Institute of Conservation, there's an environmental sustainability network. So working with other professionals to see what other people are doing and sharing ideas is really important, I think, and really helpful, because you can feel lonely. You might be the only conservator person in your group, but also then working within the institution. So within the Glenvivian, I'm working with building managers to help the sustainability of the building. And then again, it's like Robert says, okay, you don't need, those ideals are just, they're not going to make much difference in the long run. There's other things we can do. We can save a lot of energy and hardly change the outcomes for the object. So it's like, yeah, being realistic about what the effects are on the objects by those ideals, and then letting go of some of it. So I agree with Robert for that.
Brilliant, Jenny. Thank you so much. I think Sarah wanted to contribute. Yes.
Yes. Only a very little reflection about sustainability from also another point of view in which I'm so involved, which is the balance between the needs of our cultural heritage and the resources that we have to give an answer to these needs. And in my experience, I think that a very important point of view is related with the consciousness of who are really the protagonists, the stakeholders of a conservation program or activity related to the conservation of cultural heritage. So which value they give to the artwork or to a museum, to a monument site, and we are working for. Which are really the stakeholders, and what we need to give them in terms of informations and services that they need, and which utility could they receive after a well-done conservation program. And so you can give new informations, which are new messages also for the visitors and for communities in general. And so you can reach new public, new visitors, and so new stakeholders with exhibition, with educational programs, with training. And so I think that you always need to take care to every outcomes produced by your intervention. And in my opinion, this helps you to reach good sustainability in your intervention, and also to involve all the people for which the cultural heritage exists.
Fantastic, Sarah. Thank you so much. Natasha, Mohammed, would you like to say a few words? Mohammed.
For my point of view, sustainability and contribution. For example, in my museum, how we can deal with the object. What is the concept? How we can package it, receive it inside the museum. We have a different type of conservation treatment, a very specialized conservators, very qualified, also day after day. How we can store it inside the museum according to the material, not according to its history. So the concept of how we can deal with the object, and also how we can use a lot of elements beside us in our museum and also in our institution. In the end, the concept of how we can deal with it. I think by this means we can make more sustainability in the conservation.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Natasha, you wanted to jump in as well. Am I correct?
Yeah, just quickly, I can drive myself crazy thinking about ways of being a little bit more environmental in my practice, and it's changed over the years. It can go from like buying a new skin of leather and thinking, oh, there goes another animal, to and then on the other hand, I think it's sort of our job to actually take care of things so that we can keep them. So in a funny way, it's actually a little pro environment and pro. So I constantly find myself balancing these things. And then I got into the making of the cradles and I thought, oh dear, I went from saving things and taking care of things to creating new things, using raw materials, having them shipped. Oh dear, I've gone down the wrong path. I sort of like what Robert just said is, maybe look at it a little bit more practically and balance, like how significant are these little things that I'm driving myself crazy thinking about compared to, say, flying to a symposium in Portugal as opposed to sitting here online on a Zoom conference. Probably I'm doing something better for the environment by doing that. So I like Robert. So.
Thank you so much, Natasha. No, I'm with you.
Could I just
in many ways
add one more word on that in some way I say that a little bit glibly, and if I remember back in my early career, for the first half of my career, it is such a challenge to go against the kind of wisdom of the whole conservation community that says you need to do this, this, and this. That is really a tough challenge. And I feel for students and emerging conservators in that struggle that I know they're going to have over 10 or 20 years. So just recognize that you're not alone. Everybody goes through that. If you want to improve the field, you have to kind of accept that there's going to be that struggle with what's expected of you.
That's brilliant, Robert. And actually, it's a perfect segue for my next question that actually links with the first question that we also had from Jane Anderson. Jane says, Rob, could you tell us a bit more about solutions to manage, I imagine it is risk, beyond a technocratic goal focus? But I would like to add to that and ask you as well, the panel in general, to also what is the advice that you give to young conservators that are coming into museums where the structures and even the values of the museums itself do not relate with the values of these young conservators? So what is the advice that you would give to instigate institutional change? And yes, in that sense, one of those would be, I would imagine, to manage risk beyond this technocratic focus that Jane is mentioning. Robert, would you like to start also answering to Jane's question?
Sure. Thanks, Jane. I guess one of my strategies is to ally myself with broader-minded people like Jane. That helps quite a bit. For myself, the key has always been to strive to remember our aspirational goals, but not just for preservation, but for the institution as a whole, what it's trying to achieve, but to kind of keep those as markers far out on the horizon, but never forget them. But at the same time, then have these more nearby operational goals and kind of use those almost like the two sights on a rifle to see where are we going? Are we going in the right direction? So it gives kind of the broad view and the focused view at the same time. So again, not always easy, but for me, that's what I've strived to do.
Fantastic. And what advice would you give young conservators that are just joining institutions and want to promote and instigate institutional change?
Yeah, that's it's incredibly difficult, and not only as you're beginning your career. In my experience, all through my career, of having this proper balance of being open to uncertainty that we really have because it's a difficult challenge, and having the gravitas to say, I know what I'm talking about. So, I should have some influence in the institution. That is an incredibly tough challenge, at least for me, it's always been. So I feel for you in having to grapple with that. Again, my only solution to that is to have very, very clear aspirational goals and very clear technical goals, and always to refer to them. Never let yourself get sucked into interpersonal arguments, but keep returning to these goals. As long as we're talking about that, we can have some common shared understanding. And we're talking about not pointing fingers at people, but looking at a problem on the table together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Robert. I wonder if the rest of the panel would also like to discuss this. I have found, for example, that sometimes even when everyone in the room has the same values and the same direction, institutions are very stubborn and they do not want to change. It is really, really hard to promote institutional change, even when you are within that institution. So what are your experiences and your advice, your thoughts about that? Yes, Jenny? I saw your face struggle, thinking, shall I?
I think I agree with what Robert said about sticking clearly to your own goals and your own core values. And it's difficult when you don't feel that it's aligned within the institutional values. And I think the way to approach it is continue to talk enthusiastically about your own projects, your own goals and why, and then also think more deeply about the institutional values and their aims, and see if you can find benefit for the institution itself in aligning with what you're trying to do. So for instance, in Swansea, yeah, I'm really keen that we do more to find some more sustainable options for our energy and for our environmental control. The benefit for Swansea would be to save money, and if you can show them they'll save money, then that's often a bottom line for an institution, and they will change if they can see that they'll save money by doing that. Or if the other, so we're working together on that now, because they can see that the electricity bill is incredibly high, and by investing some money in sustainable solutions will actually reduce the energy bill. So that's the sort of approach. The other approach now is being aware of the bigger issues. I mean, some of the the big issues out there, for instance, Black Lives Matter, are things that are quite tricky to deal with, but I think a lot of people within organisations are very keen to move forward with that. But the way that the institution itself will also has ways to attract audiences and work with their audiences, and they will eventually, I think, come around to some public opinion, and they will then see that there's need to change. I think it's less a question of kind of going at it very goal focused, but more going back to that influence, as Robert mentioned earlier with one of his slides. It's the influencing that's the most important thing. So keep trying to influence rather than setting goals that you have to, that you really want. You want the goal, but you need to influence them towards that goal. That's what I think works. But also, yeah, how would they benefit from your goals? That's the main thing. They need to benefit from changing.
Fantastic, Jenny. Very, very practical advice, which is really good as well. I think we have a question from Katerina.
Yes, it's also for Jenny. I would like just for her to go a little deeper on, and it goes a little bit along what we've been talking about. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Because about this and advocating for us and for our profession inside institutions, or for example inside the gallery, because you work in a gallery as a conservator, but it is still a gallery. And how was it your experience in developing an exhibition that is focused more on conservation than any other thing? You're not showing just artists' artworks, you're showing the work of a conservator. And how was that experience? How did you manage to do so? Maybe I think that's my question.
Thank you for your question. How did I manage? I think it is again showing that the benefit to the gallery. So I've been working in that gallery now for 5 years, and we had the gallery was closed for 5 years previous to that. It had some money to upgrade and develop kind of the back of house facility. So there was a new conservation studio was built. Some of the money came from public sources, and part of it was to show some of the behind the scenes activities. And so my conservation studio has a glass wall onto the corridor, and there was a lot of emphasis within that grant that the public should have access to the behind the scenes things and to conservation. So we've got a tradition of doing I do quite a lot of public work. I do talks and tours in conservation. So it's already embedded in the gallery. But the public really love it. And I do work with, we've got 2 education officers, and they run various groups, and the groups come up to the conservation studio and I talk to them. So the gallery already has seen the benefit for the visitors of understanding conservation. So they were perfectly happy to do this work with the collection. And also because part of it was very multi-layered. We were working with different disciplines, the art historians and the scientists, and then also looking at some human rights issues with the pigments. So, and we have a very good curator who's keen on using the collection to explore other avenues. So I think it's very much about having, it's quite a small team, but having good relationships with all the other members of the team. I'm the only conservator there, and I'm working with the curators and the education officers and documentation officers and everyone there and the technicians, but forming good relationships with everyone you're working with I think is key to it all. And then also, again, showing the other members of the team the benefits of what you can bring to the gallery, and also attracts funding. That's the interesting thing. So working with other professions, we've got funding, so the gallery is really keen. Anything you can do to bring in money, maybe that's the bottom line. If you can show that you'll bring money into the gallery, which underpin all the activities for the exhibition, they're going to be happy with that. So yeah, the Royal Society of Chemistry gave all the funding for all the material for the exhibition, and so that was a win for the gallery as well. Actually, maybe I should have started with that. Money maybe talks louder than a lot of things. But then, you know, lots of grant giving bodies like partnerships, and they like unusual partnerships. There are money for arts and science, or human rights and arts and science. There is grant funding for that sort of thing, and then particularly with outreach projects and women in science, it's exploring maybe some of those grants to find ways that you can display conservation.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you, Katerina, for speaking. That actually links to one of the questions that we got from Ilaria, who was one of the first people to ask a question, and it's here in the chat. She says, building on the talk from Jenny Williamson, I have a question to all panelists. Which lateral skills do you feel are important for young conservators nowadays, and how can we improve them? Besides, of course, critical skills, those are the most important. Jenny, would you like to start, and then we'll go around the panel in my direction of roundness, because I don't know if it is the same or not for everyone.
Well, I think the key skills really are communication and collaboration, which is what I titled my talk. And so, yeah, that's it. I don't really want to particularly say any more about it, but communication and good relationships, build good relationships with everyone, and you'll enjoy your life more as well. So that's my top tip: communication.
That's true. Well, next we have Mohammed.
Yes, according to Jenny, communications and increase your network every day in your country and out of your country, and connected with a lot of institutions, connected with a lot of museums, searching about what is happening today in the science of conservation. Don't let the information come to you. You must go and hurry up and searching about it every day. Every day you must do it. You must increase your skills. You must increase your knowledge, your information. You must search what do you love to do, what is the benefit of you. as you know, the science of conservation, it's a wide range of science. It's different day after day after day. You must be updated, but what can it's a change every day.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Next, we have Sarah. I'm struggling how to pronounce if it is Italian, if it is English. Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, we understand. Well, I totally agree with Jenny and Mohammed about the importance of communication, but in a very large sense. Communication is also the ability to create a community between conservators and exchange, share together the results and the problems of our professions. Around the conservation of cultural heritage, a lot of different professions are involved, but not always they are able to understand the role one of each other. For example, in Italy, I'm an art historian, and we experienced a lot of time a limit in the storytelling defined by an art historian towards larger public of museum. For example, in our center, we decided to try to open our laboratories to the visits for a general public, not only to experts or scientific, but to general public. And it was, I was impressed because speaking about the technical characteristics of an artworks, about the behavior of a material, about the fragility or the risks that we have around an artwork, sometimes we can give information to people very touching or also for them, and they are really involved in the comprehension of our cultural heritage, even if they don't have a preparation in art history or in chemistry or in biology, but it is not important. The importance is to share with all the community the importance of our cultural heritage. So, in my opinion, we need to use different languages and to be able to communicate with different professionals and different stakeholders linked to our cultural heritage.
That's fantastic, Sarah. It makes me remember what Mohammed said about knowing at least one thing about everything, which is a bit challenging sometimes, but it helps indeed communicating. Natasha, do you have a few words about lateral skills?
Yeah, I was thinking yesterday there was a lot of talk about how can you have your voice heard as a conservator, and I was sort of thinking back to the early time in my career where I struggled as an introvert with, frankly, just being shy and not being able to speak up. I still have that problem, but as I've gotten older, and especially in this profession where a lot of my job is frankly listening to people, like listening to this stakeholder, that stakeholder, this guy who comes in with, you know, their mother just died and he brings in the Bible of his mother that he wants restored to hand over to his grandchild. And I think, wow, my job is actually just about listening and listening to the various people and then kind of quietly synthesizing what I've heard and turning that into a treatment, frankly. And then I'm thinking about Robert's idea of influence and his, you know, that graph you had where you like shrunk, and I thought that was kind of cool. And that perhaps there's a way of influencing that's silent. And so this voices heard idea in a funny way, in a flip way, you can do that by listening, rather than this sort of, yeah, the constant speaking out to a empty unlistening ears.
Oh, that's a great point, Natasha. Thank you for bringing that up about our active listening and try to also understand how other people are positioned within a certain subject matter. So the next two questions that we had are actually for Sarah. One of them has to do, if you would be able to tell us a bit more about the internship at CCR. And the second one is about the 5-year degree requisite for accreditation in Italy. It's not just in Italy, but if you feel it would be possible to maintain competence as a conservator restorer without taking a 5-year degree. As I did with Jane's question, I would like to expand that, if that is all right for all. And I would like to also ask Sarah, how you position the whole idea about internship within a politics of widening the participation of people who engage with this profession, how to expand the backgrounds of the people who can come in and the access to profession in terms of funding and philanthropy. And as for this idea about 5 years, the 5-year degree, I was wondering also what the other panelists think. But can we start with you, Sarah?
Yes, okay. The 5 years training path in Italy is a legal issue required by our ministry in order to be a conservator. It is more or less 15 years that we have this type of training. And so in Italy, if you want to be a restorer, you need such a type of training path. Well, we are, above all, in our international relationship, we reflect every day about this point, because in different countries, there are different criteria about the education, about the training of a conservator. And in my opinion, the best we can do is to offer our point of view, but also to understand other context of training, of practice of conservation. In my opinion, it is one of the most important things that we must do. And about the internship, yes, we offer internship to our young conservators, but we also offer internship, for example, to the community of the Young Professionals Forum, in order to introduce a young conservator in a more complex context in which you can also grow with the competencies linked to the project. For example, a conservation project today is a very complex field of competence. You need to understand a lot of technical aspects of your work, but also to understand a lot of different interests linked to this. And so always during the 5 years training path, our effort is to keep together students and professionals. And for example, in our training path, students have half-time theoretical lessons, and half-time they work from the first to the fifth year in laboratories behind our conservators. And so it is also natural to exchange experiences and also to assist to different moments of the decision process that you need to understand for your professional growth.
Fantastic, Sarah. No, that is fantastic. One of the issues that I think always when we talk about internships is who's going to support those students financially, because that is sometimes a big deterrent of people going into the profession, is that many times you have to gain work experience that is often unpaid. And how can we broaden the scope of conservation and also the people who are conservators by increasing funding opportunities for people to engage with their studies in a more meaningful way as well, right?
Yes, I understand. In fact, for example, in our forum, we don't have a lot of economical resources. And so we decided to use all the resources we have to finance one internship, only one, because we don't have so many resources. But in this way, we can cover all the expenses for the student or for the young professional. And we offer a period in our foundation. So we pay for all the expenses of travel and also for the systemation in our structure. And usually we design a program fitted on the characteristics of the young professionals. And so we try to link his or her experience and competencies with the work we are doing in this moment in order to create a good relation and also a concrete opportunity to grow.
Of course. Oh, that's brilliant, Sarah. I'm now going to go for the same direction. So next in my screen, we have Natasha. Natasha, what are your views about these processes of accreditation, education, and then also internships or placements or apprenticeships, depending on the model we exist within?
So in the last few years, the Netherlands has been putting together a register for conservators, because prior to this, there hasn't been a formal registration a process for professional conservators. And during these discussions, there were a lot of heated discussions, and there has been a lot of animosity and let's just say struggle between people with various educational or self-taught or craft-based apprenticeship backgrounds. And it took me a long time to figure out what was going on. Like, why was this a struggle? Why is it an or rather than an and? And yeah, what do I have? I do think it's probably a little bit of an and. So on the one hand, we're pushing towards more formal education, pushing. I mean, in the Netherlands now we have it's a master's degree program at the UvA. In the University of Amsterdam. And on the one hand, you push more towards sort of taking the puppy away from the mother puppy and sticking puppy into puppy institution learning school away from mom, right? And teach them over here. And then suddenly, oh heavens, we need to look for a place to put them in so that they can actually acquire the applied knowledge that just can't be given at this separate institution. And so we end up kind of going back to square one, which was sort of the original intent of the apprenticeship program. Of course, in the difficulty with the apprenticeship programs, or frankly, the way I was taught when I first started being taught, now they talk about reenactment of certain crafts. Like I was the craft, right? You didn't need to reconnect. So now in a funny way, we've divorced and brought it back again. And the one major thing, of course, that was missing is that meta, right? The looking down, critical thinking about what it is you're doing. And all of that stuff, you know, the philosophy, the ethics, that's something that probably is, well, could be more easily taught at a university. Sometimes surprisingly isn't. It surprises me how little philosophy and ethics are actually actively taught in an institutional situation. That might be also just because there's been a lot of focus on science in the last little while. But you know, we all move forwards, and there's huge advantages, I think, to turning our profession into an academic profession. And then I suppose I would just hope that that people at sort of my sort of age of where I'm at in my profession and older are willing to open their doors, I guess, to the emerging conservators, to give them the practical training to whatever degree they are able to do that, because it's absolutely necessary. You can't just go from university and throw yourself into the market and think that it's going to work. I mean, maybe it does work, but it's probably going to take years and a lot of mistakes that could be. Sometimes it's nice to start off not having to make so many mistakes. So I do hope that there are those opportunities. One super little practical thing, I had Anna, who's on the panel. She came and worked with me for a few months back in the spring, and it's a funny little practical thing, but when she first decided to come here, she was looking for a place to rent, and there was nothing on the market here in Groningen. It's very difficult to find a place to rent. She ended up staying in our family, which was absolutely lovely, thereby saving a huge amount of money while she learned something. And so sometimes for these students with the issues around money, there are funny little practical ways of trying to keep costs down while you learn. And if people are willing to sort of open hearts and doors, then maybe they're creative, kind ways of, and then you end up developing really lovely, close relationships that way. So.
Oh, that's lovely. That's really lovely. And I love that call to action, open the doors, not just of the studio, but also of yourself, because that is also important for programs of mentorship that are more informal, but that makes them sometimes a bit more intimate as well. And that is important, because one of the things that I think it's really important in the field, it's knowing that you know people that know you to a personal level, and they will help you in a way that other people will not. So that's really lovely. So next in my screen, we have Robert.
And actually, I think the other speakers are doing quite well on this, so I'm not going to contribute much, except I've been striving to learn for 45 years, and it's starting to become kind of panicky race-like to learn enough. So it's a never-ending sort of thing.
That's true. Thank you so much, Robert. Next, we have Jenny.
Yeah, so thank you. I can speak a little bit about the UK and really about painting conservation. That's the area I feel comfortable with, and that's where I'm in. So in terms of the degree and the training, I did a 3-year degree, and then I did a 3-year training course, and that's quite standard for easel painting conservation. And I don't see very easily a way around it. I think the degree is a very useful opportunity to learn more about, I did science and history of art. So to get to the level of scientific understanding that I think is really helpful in conservation, I think it's useful to do that degree, and also to have an understanding of art history. Again, I felt was very valuable going into my conservation training. The 3-year conservation training, again, is really, I did it at the Courtauld Institute. It was very good having the academic and practical training that I did in those 3 years, without any need to be, like commercial or, institution pressures that you might get. I think the real problem okay, and then there's the accreditation system. So I'm just trying to talk about the framework for it. So the accreditation system, run by the Institute of Conservation, is quite well developed in the UK. It's been running since 1999, I think, so well over 20 years. So it's been modified a bit. And the accreditation system is such that it applies to the different disciplines and doesn't require degrees beforehand. You're just showing that you are your conservation standards and your professionalism reaches a standard. It doesn't require you to have had a degree beforehand. So to receive the accredited status, the degree isn't a prerequisite. So I think in the other disciplines, or there might be different paths to the training. What was I going to say now? I mean, that's just kind of an outline to it all. And I think, yeah, do you need a degree? I think for some disciplines, maybe you do, and some disciplines you don't. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I think the real problem after your training is the internships. I think the internships and getting into the profession is quite difficult in the UK now. The job market is very competitive. A friend of mine recently trained as a conservator and then found really to get into jobs or into internships are incredibly competitive. A lot of people do unpaid internships to get the experience to then get the jobs, but if you haven't got support there, that is a real failing. And I think the UK really maybe needs to, as a profession, we need to look further at ways to get more funding for the internships. That is a big problem in the UK. And then it's incredibly competitive and wages aren't great. I know people who do the training, they're loving it, and then they can't actually get into the job market. So I think that's something that really needs to be improved, although how it can be improved is quite tricky. I think the professional bodies can maybe help with that.
Definitely.
So sorry, I can't say any more.
No, that's fine. That's completely fine. I usually say that no one goes to conservation to get rich. But I'm still waiting that life proves me wrong. So let's see. Next we have Mohammed, and then I have a question directed to Mohammed. So it's actually good. Mohammed, what is the context in Egypt, and how does the process of accreditation work, if there is any? And also, what is the situation in terms of training, internships, and also higher education?
Here in Egypt, we have two different ways. Okay, we have students from the faculty of archaeology in a different departments inside it. We have the Department of Islamic one, Greco-Roman, for Egyptology, for conservation departments, and also we can talk about a young conservator from out of Egypt. Okay, from Egypt, as you know, the students from in this faculties not able to deal with the conservation center in the museum. So in my museum, for example, and also I think for almost museum in Egypt here, they arranging a lot of training courses, workshops, and yes, courses for a different meaning and a different title, focused on the newest methods for conservation. In my museum, in the last week, we are finished NEMIC summer school. It's for 18 students from the Faculty of Archaeology, different type, and they are recognized about all the type of the conservation center here in different materials, wood, inorganic one and organic one, and also recognize about the exhibition, how they can deal with the objects in record, and how we can deal the collection inside the museum. About the internships, in my museum we are cooperate, I think, every week, every month, normally with a lot of foreign institution and foreign museum out of Egypt. From this cooperation, we can invite a lot of young conservators and scientists, researchers to come to our museum and study, see how we can do everything it's to us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mohammed. The question that we had for you is that if you could speak a bit more about the different materials you work with at the museum. But as I've been doing, if that's all right, I would like to also expand this to everyone in the panel and to ask how you address your work when you work within different specialisms or different cultures of conservation. But Mohammed, can we start with you?
Yes. For me, I am very lucky because I start my work in the museum, start in my life work in the archaeology with expedition sites. And after that, I worked in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in wood and stone and pottery, but I find myself was going towards to the selected one, the pottery. After that, I am also very lucky to be the manager of the receiving artifacts unit, who can deal with the different type of archaeology material and also different sizes of this material, from the tiny one to the huge one. So I can deal with it. Not I am the only, but I work with a team work. And also I would like to the success come from the teamwork, not from the only one. This is the fact, and this is what can we do here in my museum. The conservation center was different according to the type of the material. That I said, we have a receiving artifacts unit. We can go into making a backing and transport all the kind of the objects that the committee, the scenario committee, decided that these objects must come to the museum collection. And after that, we have a different type of conservation, different type of how we can deal with it, with the first aid lab, with the sterilization, anoxia, with insects, and we have inorganic conservation labs, organic conservation labs. We have a different type of conservation that we can deal with the object with inside them.
Fantastic, fantastic, Mohammed. It's so interesting how broad the remit is. It's really amazing. So next we have Sarah. Sarah seems to be frozen. I've been there. So shall we go to Natasha? And when Sarah is back, oh, Sarah is back? Not yet. When Sarah is back, we'll be back to Sarah.
I'm which one of these is not like the others, so the question doesn't totally apply to me. However, as somebody working in private practice with very specific materials, I often find myself going to the CCI, that's the Canadian Conservation Institute website, because they've had a really great outreach program in the last, I don't know how long they've been going, for 40 years, and in the last little while put so much of their research and information online in easy to swallow bites. And I think it was meant as much for the public and for the museum care people, not the conservators. I don't know what the word for that is in English. So their communication was super clear, is super clear, and I often go there for specifics on, for instance, if I'm doing a Bible clasp and I need to know a little bit more about metals, then I'll go there for that kind of information. And I was also curious, Mohammed, when you were giving your talk, you had a few great slides full of great information about different, that kind of breakdown per material, per preservation, what's the word, advice. I wonder whether you, whether there's, or for any of you actually within your countries, whether you have specific sites with or great links to information that private conservators can access. Your talk, it went too quickly, and I wasn't able to take a picture of some of that great information. Anyhow.
That's great, Natasha. Thank you. Mohammed and everyone, I ask you if you could share those sites on the chat so that everyone then has access to it. And in the meantime, Sarah is back. Sorry, you were frozen for a bit. It's what we don't want in conservation. We don't want things to be frozen in time. But now you're back. I wonder if you would like to contribute to the discussion.
Yes, in our foundation, but usually in Italy, above all in the schools for conservation, the specialization of laboratories are based on materials. And so you grow in your education, in your training path, only in one field of material. But in my opinion, the very interesting part of this course is the moment in which you must dialogue with other professionals, such as scientists and art historians, and link together the different perspective on conservation. Okay, and sometimes also the practical activity that our students are due to do is fundamental also in knowing what do you need when you work on a site, and how you can organize your work. And also these aspects are very important in the definition of your professional profile.
Yes, without any doubt. It's very interesting as well because indeed that division for in materials makes sense in some senses, but in other ways, when then we have composite materials, that also opens the discussion to studying conservation as an overarching approach, and also drawing on what Natasha was saying, drawing also on philosophy and the understandings of materials beyond, or materiality beyond the materials. I was going to say materials beyond their materiality, but well, you know what I mean. So next we have Robert.
Hi. So actually my background, I started in mineralogy, which was really fortunate because mineral preservation, I mean, we think of rocks as things that are permanent anyway, but it's not really true if you have a comprehensive set of minerals. We're all familiar with photosensitive things like silver halides, they're minerals too. So lots of things change very quickly, but a lot of that can be understood very clearly in terms of physical chemistry and chemical kinetics. And it was that led to this ability to assess risks, because things could be pretty clear. Your iron disulfides are subject to oxidation, so you can partition parts of the collection and know what their issues are. So that was helpful. And then because of the situation in the natural sciences, I could move to our herbarium. Was really interesting because it was cellulose based and huge and kind of flat, so much like archives. And then the fluid preserved collections, I still think are so fascinating. Each jar contains its own preservation environment, and you can get in and sample it and analyze it. And it's just a fascinating area in terms of conservation science. I encourage people to look into, because there's lots to be sorted out there still. Then, boy, as time goes on, just got into more and more kinds of collections. And I guess in recent years, it really is this challenge of plurality of values of say, indigenous perspectives on collection values versus Western perspectives, and how we balance those things is so challenging. So yeah, it's an interesting journey through materials types and societal value types and all that sort of thing.
Oh, yes, no doubt about it. And it's great to hear also about how mineralogy then led to that thinking. I usually say that the difference between quantum physics and performance art is not that big, because it's not. It's all about possibilities. And so it's also interesting how our understanding of something in one end can help us understand something else in our very specific way. Jenny, would you like to also come in and comment on this topic?
Yeah, so yeah, I trained as an easel painting conservator a long time ago, and all my practical work is with paintings. I wouldn't feel comfortable with doing any practical work on any other materials. Occasionally, I collaborate with a conservator who does paper conservation if she's got works of art on paper, which might be in oil. So say an oil sketch on paper occasionally, because she's not used to dealing with oil paint. So we maybe collaborate on that. But beyond that, it's very much, I only do paintings. But I'd like to just say there are many issues that the different disciplines and conservators in different disciplines share. And in Wales, we're very lucky that we have a group called Conservation Matters in Wales, and generally this has been going for quite a while, and generally we meet twice a year, and that's all conservators in Wales get together for a conference from all the different disciplines, and we have topics that are generic through the disciplines. So often there's things that we can connect through, for instance, the ethics of conservation and philosophy, maybe kind of more practical things like education activities or working within institutions. So there's a number of, I feel, bigger topics that we share as different types of conservator, which are really, I can learn a lot from. I sometimes go along to a conference and think, well, what will I learn from this? And I can learn a huge amount from a stone conservator or a metals conservator. And I've always been really interested in the ethics and philosophy of conservation, and recently did a project with an artist. She's a black and white photographer, works in London and lectures on photography in London, and we did a joint project that turned into a conservation exhibition. So working outside of the discipline, I often really informs my work as well. So it's the bigger picture, it's not just the materials. I think the materials are a fundamental part of my work, but the bigger picture is also fundamental.
Definitely. And the devil often is in the details, right? Sometimes some details are so important, and they tend to be also the trickiest to sort. It's really challenging. And I imagine that working with paintings, but with living artists, it also poses its own set of issues.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's really useful to have those conversations with artists. So recently I had a painting in the collection by a living artist, and I had developed a particular problem. Some salts were coming out onto the surface, and the artist lived in the States, and I managed to track her down and had a conversation with her about it, whether or not she wanted it removed or whether it was ethical to do that. And by having the conversation, it really informed the treatment process. So yeah, those things have to happen too.
Definitely. So the next two questions that we have in the chat, one is regarding isinglass, and Robert very kindly answered in the chat. Sometimes when I'm teaching my students, I do make a warning that most of our practice is not very vegan, so that they know about it. Besides a matter of supply chain scarcity and infrastructures, we also have issues when we are dealing with the corpses of living beings, which sometimes can also be quite challenging. And also we have a request from Radmila that is asking for protocols for different polymer types and official and unofficial resources that could be recommended. And I would ask you to add those in the chat. That's one of the advantages of having those things online, is that you can really crowdsource the knowledge of the 53 people that are right now participating in the meeting. So please do share your knowledge and your resources. In the meantime, another question that we have here has to do with professional associations. So Anna Turais asks, Sarah, you mentioned the Young Professional Forum, and Mohammed mentioned the importance of networking. I think right now, almost everyone has mentioned the importance of networking, not only for collaborating with people from other backgrounds, but also for growing your own community of practice, as Natasha mentioned. My question, not my question, but Anna Turais' question for all of you is how important it is for students and emerging conservators to join professional associations. How did it help you reach your positions? And shall we start with Sarah, who was the person mentioned by Anna? Before we go there, let me just say that my computer is complaining of lack of battery. Oh, these good old infrastructures and equipments are really happening. So I will just turn off my camera for a minute while we go through various people while I get my charger, and I will ask Anna or Ruth or Katarina or Margarida, anyone, to just run the discussion while I go get myself my charger, if that's all right. Sarah, would you mind starting?
Okay, yes. Well, in the designing of the Young Professionals Forum, we based the forum on the connection with the most important international association. In fact, the partners of the forum are the IIC, ICOM, ICOMOS, and so on. And we try to create a relationship between the participants of the forum and these big institutions or association in different ways. For example, we organize some workshops led by some of these institutions and associations, because, for example, if you work with ICOM, you can focus your attention on the role that a conservator can take in managing collection and museum activities, for example, while if you work with ICROM, you adopt a very different perspective about communities and about different contexts in which you can operate with your professions. And then we try to facilitate some direct dialogues and meeting between one singular young professionals and some experts belonging to these associations and institutions, so that everyone has also the opportunity to deep some contents and some topics particularly significant for him or for her.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for the lovely people who offered their moderation. I'm back with my charger, so it's all good and running. Fantastic. Shall we go now to Mohammed?
It's very important, as you know, to connect with other institutions. Why? Imagine it like a stairs, and you put your leg in the first one. You put in your mind you must reach to the end. As you know, good, better, best, you must tell to yourself every day, I want to be the best. So I will let you know something for my career that I invited to at 2080 to a workshop in the Cyprus, according to my presentation about ancient materials training school. We were talking about how we can use the rays of synchrotron to analyze the heritage. From this lecture, step by step, nowadays, I am one of the users of this beam inside the synchrotron light for experimental science and its application in Middle East based in Jordan. So see the importance of this share of this, how if you want to cooperate or attend or link it in any institution, it's look like a step by step, you will reach to you want to do.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Those are great points. Next, Jenny, I wonder if you could also join the discussion.
Yeah, so I think professional bodies are really important and useful in anyone's career, and particularly when you're starting out. They're a great way to link to resources for information. It gives you up-to-date information about latest research and projects. So I belong to ICON, which is the Institute for Conservation in the UK. I belong to IIC. I belong to the Association for British Picture Restorers, which is a UK or British association just for painting restorers. And that's a really useful source of information for me. And also, yeah, there's Conservation of Matters in Wales, which is a regional group. So as I said, yeah, it's a good way to keep up to date with information, access to conferences. It's also a way to have opportunities for your own growth and development, so you can be involved with your professional bodies. So I've been involved in various ways, and I was a trustee at ICON and became vice chair, and that was really a fascinating process. I'd really encourage you to become involved. You learn lots of soft skills, but you can also influence the direction of the profession. So there were lots of interesting discussions, and I was there when we started the environmental sustainability group. I was part of setting up the equalities and diversity task and finish group. So things like that, you can actually influence how the profession goes. And we had a lot of discussions about internships again. So get involved. If you have issues and think the profession could go in different directions and you want it to go in different directions, you have the opportunity to do that. Also, if you belong to some of these bodies, it gives you access to grants. So I've definitely had quite a few grants because I belong to my professional body. And then it's a lovely opportunity for networking and meeting people, which is just great, you know. And there's lovely to meet other people. You make friends for life, and sometimes you get professional opportunities as well. So there's a lot of good reasons to join, and I've really enjoyed belonging to all of my professional bodies.
Oh, that's great. It's a great experience also to hear how, Jenny, you moved from joining the association to becoming vice chair and a trustee, and the degrees of involvement that one could have. One can just be a member, but that you can also be part of the institution and try to impact the field in other ways. And there are various degrees of participation that allow everyone to participate as much as they can and want, which I think it's also a good point. Robert, would you like to come in? I saw that you said, I'm certain that I would not be here today without the acceptance and support I received from all those institutions. But I wonder also if you could also say how the importance and relevance of these professional bodies has changed with time since you first came into the profession.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because that was the thought, excuse me, that I had in mind really, is if we want to know well, the field of conservation has evolved tremendously over the last few decades, and we have to expect that that's going to continue into the next few decades. So if we want to know what the field of conservation is, we have to be actively involved in associations, or else our sense of what the field is drifts apart from what it really is. And we don't want that. It's, I mentioned earlier, one of my biggest struggles is always between maintaining my uncertainty and having authority, and clear authority. And I think membership in professional associations is the biggest aid to maintaining that kind of balance, because you can talk to your colleagues in ways that they're open and accepting of the way that you're questioning things. It's kind of a safe place for exploring the boundaries of our field and how it should be growing. So incredibly important. Like Jenny, I must be a member of 8 or 10 different associations, most of them conservation, but a few others, Society for Risk Analysis. And I've always found it important to be in some other allied profession associations to try to bring those understandings to our field.
Yes, and also another aspect that it's really interesting that you just mentioned, Robert, is how those institutions and those professional associations also have events and have these communities that meet up, and they allow you to explore your own failures in a way that most of times it's quite kind. That makes me remember a conference from IIC where there was a session just dedicated to failure. And there have been many others, and that is important because everyone fails and will fail. That's the only certainty we have, is that there will be moments of failure, and be able to discuss that with your peers in a non-judgmental way. It's so important, especially when you are evolving as a professional, right? So Natasha, would you like to say a few words?
Speaking on that failure conference, I saw that go by and I thought, oh, that I don't want to do that one. Here in the north of the Netherlands, we have a small conservation organization or association, and we have regular nights called slapeloze nachten, sleepless nights. People bring in their a case study of something where they something truly it failed, or they couldn't make a decision, or and speaking of Robert's idea of a safe space, that was truly a safe space to kind of and the nice thing about these sort of umbrella conservation organizations is that you get perspectives from different materials or objects. So and sometimes that can really influence if you're stuck on something and you hear and you can kind of go up a level in terms of abstraction and then come back down again, and it gives you a whole different insight on what you're doing, and it kind of can unstick you. So super useful. I've also just practically, as a private practice conservator, we live in our own little tiny bubbles. There is no institution to back us up. And so basically our social lifeline are these associations. And I've also been, Helia, you mentioned, or no, Robert, you mentioned the allied fields, which has also been important to me. So I'm on I'm a member of these various bibliophile clubs, and what they give me is, in Dutch we have a expression, kijken in de keuken, so like a look inside somebody's kitchen. To actually understand how my clients understand their books, for instance. And because it's a safe space for them, you learn a lot of things that information that you might not necessarily get, or you learn just by listening, you learn things that you wouldn't have even known to ask of your clients. And then you hear that little thing in that safe space, and then you think, next time I'm going to ask my client that. So there's that different perspective that I find really helpful. And again, it's because of that safe space and the collegiality. And then I think finally, what Jenny said about joining the association. As a shy person, it took me a while to realize there were a lot of, you hear a lot of complaints, and I myself had a lot of complaints. Why is it this way? And who made this decision? And then you join something and you realize Right. Actually, the association or the organization, the institution is actually just the people, and it's the people making the decisions. And if you sit on that and you listen and you learn, eventually you realize, actually, I have to stop complaining, because if I don't help to make a change here, then I can't expect anybody else is going to do it. Yeah, that's all I got to say.
That is excellent. I think one of the action points from this meeting, this conference, could be to create more of those safe spaces, because many times at least I tend to look at failures as personal failures, and they are not personal failures, because no one goes to the field of conservation that it's grossly unpaid and very precarious to hurt artworks. That's not what we do, right? So it is important to create that collegiality where it doesn't exist. So I think that would be fantastic, and conferences like this also create those forums, hopefully. Another question that just popped into my head, and it's not in the chat, so it is on me completely to formulate this, so please bear with me, because it's quite tricky, is also what is the role, what is the responsibility that those professional associations have towards the younger conservators? Because it is more often than not, younger conservators are not part of those associations. So what is that responsibility? And of course, I have my opinion on that, but because I have the perks of being a moderator, I can just not tell it. So I will start this time as well with Mohammed, if that's all right. Sorry to put you on the spot, Mohammed, but yes.
The responsibility for the conservator.
No, the responsibility of that professional associations have towards the younger generations. It doesn't need to be younger people. It can just be people who are just starting. Conservation might as well be a second or a third career. So what are the responsibilities that those professional associations have towards those young conservators?
The transfer of knowledge and the transfer of information, and also how can you deliver yourself as an institution to the conservator. So as you know, every museum, every institution have mission and vision and values. So from these issues, you can deliver your message and deliver yourself to the younger conservator or any kind of conservator. And from this point, you can build with him everything that you.
That's fantastic. Great starting point. I wonder if we could now hear from Sarah.
It's not a very easy question, because in my experience, I noticed that sometimes, well, in my opinion, they have a very big responsibility on the young conservators, but sometimes young people can't reach positions or the possibility to speak inside these organizations and associations. Fortunately, today we have also other instruments to build our professional community. And I invite all young professionals not to stop in front of this difficult inside some very traditional realities or associations. Probably it's a good thing to try to change, but also to find other alternative ways to exchange experience, because the theme of failure, or above all, I was impressed by the presentation of Robert Waller about the need to accept some conditions that we can't control, but we can share strategies to front these limits, or these, and also to understand that as conservator or people involved in conservation, we can't do everything we would like to do, but we can help the cultural heritage to survive in any case.
Oh, great point. Exactly. The accept what you cannot change, but also try to find ways of mitigating the negative effects that can bring, right? I wonder next if we could hear from Robert.
Sure. Oh, excuse me. So I think from the perspective of organizations, I think they have a responsibility to be open to needs. That's kind of where it starts and stops, I think. Then for young conservators, I think they want to be the change that they want to see. And I see on our organizing committee for this, we have Megan Monahan, who in Canada has been a real mover and shaker for getting emerging conservators group within our Canadian Association for Conservation. So it was really, and that's happening at IIC as well, and other organizations, but it's really by those people, by the emerging conservators, that kind of take hold and do it. And as I mentioned before, these associations are accepting and supportive. So if someone sees a need like that, then, well, it's up to them. They've got to be the change that they want to see. And they'll find that these national and international organizations are very open to that kind of thing. Gosh, I think there was one other thing I wanted to say, but once I get on a track, I'm gone. So, anyway.
That's great. And Megan says thanks, Robert. And Anna says, of course, and Megan is in the organizing committee of this conference, as Robert just mentioned as well. Jenny, do you have a few words about how also emerging conservators can get involved?
Oh, well, I think what Robert said is so true that, of course, yes, the professional organisations have responsibility to be open to anything that the emerging professionals and conservators would like to do. The only thing I was thinking was really that, yeah, I think professional bodies have a responsibility to nurture the young professionals, emerging conservators, because we're a community that, you know, we are a community of conservators, and how the new cohort come in is part of the conservation community, and we're all in it together. And I feel I benefited when I was emerging and at the beginning of my career from support from the professional bodies, and so we should, as towards the end of our careers, I feel I'm perfectly happy, and it's good to support the newer professionals coming in. And it's just, and yeah, we are a community, and I feel I'm actually in the mentor scheme, and I'm mentoring with a young professional, and I think I learn more from it than she does. So I think we benefit. It's a two-way process, and probably we benefit more than you do. So I think we should be open to anything that you'd like to suggest. That's what I would like to say.
Oh, that's fantastic, Jenny. I also feel that very much, although I'm still not an established conservator, I would say. I do feel that whenever I'm teaching with my students, I learn so much with them. It is amazing. It is
definitely. I'm not sure I'm established. I'm just old. That might be a better.
Well, I think probably established is a much more, it's a truer term than old in this case. But Natasha, the reason why I'm asking you to come last is also because you have that specific point of view from someone from the private practice on the one hand, that also Jenny brings, and I think everyone here in one way or the other has been involved with private practice, but also you have point of view from craft, which is also a very interesting concept, at least for me, because craft, as you said, in many ways it's opposed to literacy or knowledge, which it's not actually. That is the same division between technique and epistemic practice. It's not really there, right? Because craft, it's a way of embodied knowledge, as many other ways of knowledge are a way of practicing theory, if this makes sense. But Natasha, I wonder in that sense, how you see these professional bodies also being in the Netherlands as opposed to being in the UK or a more North American context.
Lots of questions. Don't know where to go.
Sorry.
Different directions. Let me see. Well, you know what? The first thing I want to say, because it's we're speaking to a bunch of emerging conservators, is something that I really wish I had known when I was young. Was that older people, and I count myself in the older people. I'm coming down on the other side of the mountain. Actually, we want to share with younger people. We're noticing that our associations are kind of, you notice that sort of graying. And when that graying happens and you spot somebody who's not quite graying yet, you recognize them, you see them, and you kind of want to help them. And I wish I had known that when I was younger, because I might have dared to ask for more help rather than trying to figure it out on my own. So sort of dare to join, dare to ask, dare to listen. And that's the beginning of, what Mohammed said about talking about the network, how important that is. That's kind of where it grows. What was the question in terms of craft? And
I don't even know. I think it has been a really long discussion, so I think I was not very successful in putting the question out there.
Oh, it's a little bit like theory and craft and what they are.
And how do professional associations could help putting a bit more of gray in all the sense of the words in that division, because that division, in my point of view, is not really there.
Is not there. Yeah, fully understand that. And I guess the association is that beautiful spherical space where it all happens, right? And it all interacts, and you've got different ages, different disciplines, all kind of happening in that space. So absolutely, there's a much bigger gray area than there is a false polarity between those two things. Yes, join associations.
Fantastic. Oh, I think we have a question from Ruth, but before we go there, because she doesn't seem to be, before Ruth poses her question, I would like to say, Robert is a hand raised. Sorry, go ahead, Robert.
Yes, I did remember that other thing that I wanted to say.
Go.
And it is just a nice little thing that our Canadian Association for Conservation does, is that at our conferences, it has session chairs be emerging conservators. And I think that's a wonderful idea for getting them exposed, getting to see things. And the alternative is to get dithering old farts like me up there that don't do such a good job, as someone who sees it as a great opportunity and they prepare well. And it's one of the most wonderful things I've seen develop in our association. And I try to take it to some other associations, but they're stuck on the dithering old people doing the job.
Oh, that's great, Robert. And regarding getting old, the good thing about time is that it's very democratic and we are all getting old at the same rate. So everyone here is growing older at the same time and at the same rate. So we are getting older together, which is also good. Ruth, would you like to pose your question?
Yes, thank you so much. My question has been also brought up in the other sessions, but I would also like to hear your thoughts about it. So what was it like for you to work among, what is it like for you to work among other professionals in multidisciplinary teams? So how do you overcome your challenges? Because at least here in Portugal, I think there is some tension between conservators and other professionals. So we also wanted to bring for example, Sarah here, as with a perception on the other side of art history. So I would love to hear your thoughts also about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Shall we start with Sarah, with the caveat that there are tensions with all disciplines and professions, I have to say. It's like, it's not, conservation is not exceptional in that either. But go ahead, Sarah, go ahead.
About me, as an art historian, I always need to speak with someone else who speaks other languages. And so I love my work with conservators above all, and then also with diagnostics, scientifics in general. But in my actual job, in which I need to keep together multidisciplinary equipes about single projects or works is not so easy. It's not so easy, but yes, but also because we don't have an habit about it. Well, in Italy, in Europe, and in the world, the scientific approach to conservation is well known, but the practice of this is not always so easy. Not always so easy. And for example, there is a tradition in which sometimes some people speaks about the secrets of your job. And in my opinion, it is the worst concept you can use in a work like conservation, which needs to be open, to share, to change the experience one to each other. But we need to respect the particular abilities of everyone in our working equipe.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I love your comment about the secrets of the craft, and I love how Robert reacted. So Robert, if you don't mind, would you mind just coming in?
Actually, I think we're exceedingly fortunate on the one hand that everybody appreciates cultural property. So it's pretty easy to get people allied into our concerns in that way. Boy, you give them an opportunity to research something about a painting or something, and they think, oh, that's really terrific. Now, our challenge is we're broke. We don't have any money. And so that's kind of the difficult part. But if we work from our strength, that everybody's really interested in what it is that we do, then we can make some good progress.
That's fantastic, Robert. And speaking about multidisciplinary teams, Mohammed addressed that specifically in his presentation. And I have to say, Mohammed, that I do very much have lab envy looking at the infrastructure you have in your museum. Can you say a bit more about how you work together in those multidisciplinary teams? And how easy or not easy it is? What are the challenges, as Ruth asked?
Inside the museum?
In your practice,
yes,
however you define it.
For me, I also will talk about two different issues. I work with a very different mission in archaeological sites excavation. Sites like Spanian one, American from the University of Hawaii, and also excavation from the Egyptian here. The dealing with the foreign one in Egypt, so benefits for each other. According to Sarah, she talking about the practical issues and using by your hands with your mind, academic one and the crafts in your hand. And you need from the other side, the foreign one, the latest things that he can use it, that he can apply it in his country. We can exchange our experience together. Inside my museum, you are not working alone. You are working in an institution. And all of us going to one main, the object. how we can save it. You are not save it alone. You must deal with a lot of departments, from the not the smallest one, but from administrative and the relationships, creators, keepers, everyone inside the museum going to save the object. But who is the first one? The conservator. The conservator must think how we can deal with all of this and make the benefits for the objects in there.
Fantastic, Mohammed. It's also really interesting what you mentioned, because sometimes there are those somewhat invisible aspects that also are part of the team. For example, when I worked at the Tate, the TMS, which is a collection management system, could be seen as part of the team. And sometimes it was really frustrating because it did not oblige to what I wanted it to do and what was needed for the conservation of the object. So there are many infrastructures that are also participating in that process. Jenny and Natasha, would you like to say anything about this? Together potentially with some final thoughts.
I could quickly say something. I think where I work at the Vivian, it's a small team. I think that's a key to the success of it, because we are quite a small team. I think we have maybe 15 members of staff altogether. So in that it's so small, working within the other with my colleagues is quite is generally quite good. It's too small a team for us to kind of develop into factions. We all just work together, which I feel very grateful for. And I'm lucky that they seem to respect conservation. So that is quite a good, it's good setup there. But I do have issues. I mean, I have to work with the council, and I've currently got a big problem with a cycle of massive paintings that's in a hall that is used for events, and they had the roof leaks. We have leaks going down the paintings, and so I have to work with a building surveyor and the team that manages the buildings in Swansea City Council. So there's a group of all sorts of different people who I've never met before, and it's trying to get on with them and trying to persuade them to do what I want, and that's very difficult. I don't know that I'm very successful there, because currently the paint, this roof is leaking and the leaks keep moving, and I've suggested we've covered about half of the paintings because the roof's already leaked on those. So let's cover the rest of the paintings because the roof will leak on those, and they still want the paintings uncovered until the leak leaked on them. Well, it's very hard. It's very hard to work with people in different disciplines, because I think what the hardest bit is they have got an agenda and you've got an agenda, trying to understand their agenda and I think getting to the bottom of that is probably the key to it, and I'm still struggling with some of those issues. I think it's just, but again, it's communication. I think if you and collaborating with people, keep trying to be open-minded about what they're trying to do, and I'm hoping if I keep trying, maybe we'll come to a better solution. So it's an ongoing process with me, interdisciplinary working with some areas.
That's a great example for a session on preventive conservation. let's not prevent damage until it happens.
Yeah. I'm persuading them. I'm trying to persuade them by telling them it'll be cheaper to protect it than it will be to pay for the repair afterwards.
Exactly.
So the financial route is sometimes the best route to go down.
Exactly. It's just follow the money.
Yeah.
Natasha, would you like to jump in? And this will be the last contribution of this panel. Sorry, let me just say that, because we are reaching the final bit of the panel.
Ooh, okay. Well, as a freelancer, I have the disadvantage of not having an institution behind me, but I have the great advantage of being my own institution. And what I've noticed as a freelancer is the hierarchy is flat. If somebody wants my help, then they're going to have to kind of play with me in that sense. And I've rarely, if ever, had a problem in terms of finding the respect and the voice I need when I'm working as a team, just because of that flat hierarchy. So there's a, you know, I think a lot of you emerging conservators listening to this panel are wondering about, you know, is it possible to start a private practice and what does that entail and stuff? And I would say that the one lovely advantage of it is that you do always have an equal voice playing with the other equal voices. And even if you're working for and with an institution, the institution again is made up of human beings. So find the human beings within that organization and then flatten the hierarchy, and then you're speaking human to human. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great way to actually end this discussion, that we need flat hierarchies. And that would bring a whole different session to the discussion. How can we create flat hierarchies in institutions? That would be a fantastic session. So note for the future organizing committee. That could be a really nice session. So thank you so much for everyone who participated in this last session of the Faces of Conservation. It's great to see the diversity of opinions and perspectives in this. Personally, it was a fantastic experience to also bring together people who are part of institutions, part of private practice, that, in my opinion, and now I can say it, is grossly underrepresented in many institutions and relevant literature. So I think we need more voices from people from private practice, from outside of Europe and North America, and it is great to see steps being given in that direction. And it was really fantastic to see you, to see some of you again, and to meet some of you online. Hopefully next time we'll meet in person. And I now invite you all to go to the closing remarks session. And I saw that they are also going to take a picture, which I find fairly amusing. So notice that. And now I pass on to the local organizing committee, someone who might want to give some directions in case you do want to do that.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Elia. Yeah, the closing remarks are now and are here, so it's easy for everyone. Thank you so much. It was a great session. We truly thank you, Elia, Jenny, Mohammed, Natasha, Robert, and Sarah, for your time and for all your shared knowledge. I think it ended on a very positive note, inciting action and involvement. So thank you. And a thank you to all the participants also who were here with us today. I think this is why we all came here and spent these 3 days with such an amazing group of professionals from all around the world, with such diverse experiences, backgrounds, and fields. However, we all have the same driving force and the same passion for the conservation of cultural heritage. And I think it's very inspirational, especially for someone that is just getting started. So I think these sharing moments and learning moments are very important to develop ourselves and to be better professionals and to learn from each other and to open our horizons. So Anna, Katrina, and I loved this initiative when we visited Cologne in 2019, and we felt like we should do the same here in Lisbon. Unfortunately, COVID kind of messed up our plans, but I think it still worked. So I hope we inspired some of you to do the same in your university for next edition of Students and Emerging Conservators. It is the most enriching experience for me. So think about it and come talk to us if you want. And hopefully we will all be able to see each other personally in 2023 or before. And now I just wanted to share a few numbers regarding this edition as well. We had a total of 263 people being a part of this conference over these 3 days, where more than half are students, around 1/4 are emerging conservators, and another quarter established conservators. And we also have all continents represented among our participants and speakers throughout 67 different countries. So we not only had many dozens of participants in each session, but we also had many interested in other moments of the conference, like the video tours, the quiz, the networking sessions. So we are really happy that you enjoyed these moments as well. On that note, we still haven't announced the quiz winners. It was a close call, but the winning team's name is We Can Do It. Congratulations. You will be receiving a hard copy of the latest issue of Studies in Conservation. So we will contact you later for details. And now the last day has come to an end, and I just wanted to thank you again and give the floor to Anna and Katerina so they can say a few words as well. So bye and see you soon.
Okay, perhaps I can go now. So I think first of all, I would just like to thank IIC for giving us this opportunity to organize such an amazing conference. And I think it goes a lot with what we were saying now in the last session of getting the younger generation involved. And I think there's no better way to do it than letting us organize a conference as big as this one. So thank you, IIC, for having had this amazing idea, well, some years ago, and for giving us the opportunity to give the students and emerging conservators and professionals from all over the world this possibility to learn and freely ask questions and share experiences. I think it's a very positive experience for all of us. I think it's also important for us to thank our university, from whom we had an amazing support, and especially from our two professors, Agnes Legac and Conceição Casanova, who were here the entire time and who helped us tremendously. Also to Mariana Escamilla and Charlotte Hoffman, who were members of the local organizing committee of the past edition, the Conservators Reflection, that happened in 2019 in Cologne, and that from that time on, were always helping us and guiding us through this adventure of organizing an international conference, which has so many steps and so many new things that we had to learn throughout this process. Also to Sarah Stanage and Megan Monaghan, with whom we virtually met for the past, I don't know, 6-7 months. And without their help, we also wouldn't have been able to organize this. To all supporters, because yes, even an online event does require some money. And so I'm just gonna mention their names: Tuvu, EXPM, Expectral Tech, J. Hewitt and Sons, Rutledge, Werner Muir, Hammond, and Willard. Thank you very much for your support. Also to the 4 museums in Lisbon and their conservators, who allowed us to invade their laboratories with a filming team with us, and to make the video tours that hopefully transported all the participants to Lisbon virtually, and hopefully gave you this little wanting to come to Lisbon and visit us in person. So to the National Museum of Ancient Art, the National Museum of Archaeology, the National Museum of Natural History and Science, and the Torre do Tombo National Archive. And well, of course, to the filming team, who worked very hard to make these wonderful videos: Tiago Santos, Bernardo Naya, João Rufino, and Henrique Soares. I think these are all the people that I would like to thank, and all of you also for joining us and for making this experience such a great one. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Katerina. I think you managed to thank to everyone that we really needed to thank. So thank you for doing that. As for me, I just want to mention you two one more time. If it were for you, none of this would have happened. If we didn't met in Cologne those 2 years ago,
there wouldn't be nothing like this today. We wouldn't be here all together. So yeah, thank you for being such help organizing all of this. And thank you to all of our participants today, and to all the speakers, to Elia, who moderated such a wonderful session. And I think for now, ending and closing the entire conference, we just wanted to ask you to turn on your cameras so we can take a picture with everyone. And we hope to see you all in the next IIC Student and Emerging Conservators Conference, wherever it will be. Thank you.
Be sure to smile. I don't know if it's already done. Do you think we have everyone? I think we do. So thank you again, everyone. It was a pleasure. So I think we still haven't done it. So sorry, smile again.
Not everybody has their cameras on, but I think maybe I am. Okay, oh, it moved. Okay, and then just the second page. Here, it moved again, but that's fine. Okay, I think it's done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. See you again. Bye-bye.
See you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Good luck.
Thank you. So nice to meet you all.